This is chapter 5 of The Last Holiday Concert. In chapter 4, we found out that Mr. Meinert's job is at stake. He is probably going to be let go from the school, who has run out of money to pay the music and the art teachers. And so we kind of understand now why Mr. Meinert might be in a worse than usual mood. Chapter 5 is called Temptations. Hart's dad was home in time for dinner, plus he had brought 2 large pizzas, so everyone was in a pretty good mood. As Hart bit into a big slice of pepperoni with extra cheese, he debated whether or not to tell his parents about his detentions and the rubber band incident. This was the weekend Zach's dad had promised to take 4 of the guys to a hockey game at Madison Square Garden, Rangers against the Bruins. It would be a rotten weekend to get grounded. So maybe I shouldn't tell. But he had to serve the 2 detentions, and his mom was always home from work by 3:30, so that was a problem. Maybe I could get Kenny Lambert to come over tomorrow after Mom gets home and tell her I had to stay after and do some stuff. Kenny would do that for me, and it wouldn't be a lie. Then I could just take the late bus home at 4:30. Hart felt like he could get away with not telling. He took a long drink of grape soda, burped, and then quickly said, "Excuse me." Then he thought, except what about the second day? Staying late 2 days in a row is going to look fishy. Mom will want all the details. And what about Sarah being alone for half an hour both days? Mom won't like that. Hart knew that if he got caught telling anything less than the whole truth, that would mean big trouble. He reached for the sausage and mushroom pizza, and he thought, so maybe I should just tell what happened and take my chances. Sarah wiped her mouth with her napkin, put it back in her lap, and said, "So, Hart, did you have an interesting day at school?" Hart almost gagged on a gob of cheese. It was Sarah's tone of voice. She knew. She knew everything, and she was about to rat on him. Hart's private debate was over. He swallowed fast and nodded. Yeah, actually school was a little too interesting today, because I did something stupid in chorus. I was messing around with a rubber band, and it accidentally hit Mr. Meinert. Now I have to stay after school tomorrow and Friday. His mom and dad frowned. Sarah smiled. Hart shrugged and put on a sheepish face. He said, yeah, Mr. Meinert got pretty mad, but the principal knew I'd never try to hit anybody on purpose. But I shouldn't have been playing with rubber bands, so that's why I got the detention. Boy, I'll never do anything like that again. His mom nodded. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I guess I'll have to leave work early tomorrow and Friday. His dad said, 2 days after school? Hart said, I know, it's a big punishment, but that rubber band hit Mr. Meinert, Dad, and it could have even hit him in the eye. So that's why Mr. Richards made it 2 days. And he's right. I shouldn't have had those rubber bands at school. His dad nodded. Sounds like you've learned a good lesson. And Hart nodded. Yeah, I have. Hart knew he was home free. He took a bite of pizza and glanced sideways at his sister. Sarah was frowning. On the other side of town, Lucy Meinert was talking with her mouth full. You know what I think? I think you should quit. She stabbed the air with her chopsticks for emphasis. Right now, just quit. The school day was behind him now, and Mr. Meinert was starting to recover his sense of humor. He smiled as he tipped a white cardboard container and reached in for another helping of stir-fried shrimp. His wife said, I'm not kidding, David. I'm making enough money to cover our expenses, and we've got some savings, too. You should walk into that office tomorrow and tell little King Richards that you quit, effective immediately. If the taxpayers in this town want to fire music and art teachers, fine, let them. Let them go ahead and raise a pack of culturally stunted morons. It'll serve them right. Mr. Meinert's wife had studied music, too, and they had met at college. But Lucy realized she didn't have the patience to be a teacher, and she didn't want to try to earn a living as a singer either. She'd gotten a job at a computer software company. The skills that made her good at reading and writing computer code. Now she was on her way to becoming a software developer, and she had less patience than ever, especially about the way her husband's school was run. After a long drink of water, she started in again. Idiots. I mean, if a company was running low on money, it wouldn't try to cut costs by firing its most creative people. That's just dumb. What you do is ask everyone in the company to take a pay cut, and then everyone pulls together and they think and they work until they find a way to get more money. And if you really have to fire people, then you start near the top. You fire administrators and assistant supervisors and people who don't do the most important work. If you ask me, that's what ought to be happening at the schools in Brentbury. And what about the rest of the town government? If they could figure out how to find some money, if they really believed education was so important. But they're all too dumb and too selfish. So I say you should quit. Tomorrow. Just walk in there and quit. It was a tempting idea, but Mr. Minert shook his head and said, "You know I can't do that." "Why not?" said Lucy. "Afraid you won't get a good recommendation to some other school? What happens at your new school in 5 or 6 years when the economy shrinks again? I'll tell you what'll happen. They're going to fire you, just like Brentbury did. Honestly, I don't see why you want to keep teaching. There's no future in it." He and his wife had had this conversation before, and David Minert didn't want to argue. It was the only thing his wife didn't quite understand about him. He had reasons for wanting to be a teacher, personal reasons. Between the ages of 5 and 16, young Dave Minert had attended 9 different schools in 7 different states. As his dad's career advanced, the family had moved to follow the jobs. Dave had spent part of almost every school year as the new kid. During those years, the one thing that had always been the same was his music. He had a great voice and perfect pitch, and he was a whiz on the piano. His band and chorus teachers had always made him feel at home. Music had been the one thing Dave could depend on, no matter where they lived. 2 years ago, when David Minert had gotten the job teaching music in Brentbury, he was thrilled. The town's music program was recognized for excellence all over the state, even around the nation. He and his wife bought a small condo in Brentbury, and David Minert felt like he had really come home. He wanted to stay put. He wanted to have a family someday and never make his kids have to move. He wanted to be the teacher who knew how to make the new kids feel welcome. He wanted to teach his neighbors' children and watch them grow up. He wanted to stick around so he could see which kids turned into real musicians, because he knew some of them would. His wife didn't understand why he went to the concerts at the junior high school. He went because 2 years ago those children in the 8th grade chorus had been in the 6th grade chorus. They were still his kids. And as soon as there was a staff opening, he hoped to move up to the high school chorus program and begin working with more serious singers and more challenging music. But for now, the 6th grade chorus was his home, and it was a good home. Until a month ago, that is. Fired. The school district didn't call it that. They called it an RIF, a reduction in force. He hadn't been fired. He'd been RIF'd. It wasn't personal. They weren't getting rid of him. They ran out of money, so they got rid of his job. Fired or RIF'd, it still amounted to the same thing. They were even the same letters, just rearranged. And Mr. Richards had been right this afternoon in his office. Mr. Minert had been upset ever since he'd gotten the news. And yes, his reaction to Hart shooting that rubber band today had been way over the top, but he couldn't quit. Not that the kids would mind. They'd probably clap and cheer. This year's chorus was a tough group. Over half of the kids never wanted to work, always resisted every new song, and classroom discipline had never been his best skill anyway. Still, quitting wasn't an option. It just wouldn't be right. Lucy was encouraged by her husband's silence. Really, David, think about it. You put in all those extra hours to find new music. You plan the field trip to the Metropolitan Opera rehearsal every year. You organize the parent volunteers to make programs and decorations for every concert. You tutor kids. You have that new sight reading group. You spend extra time with kids who have solos. Plus, you lend a hand with the 6th grade band and the orchestra, too. You even write new arrangements, all on your own time. I know you love your work, but you put in at least 10 hours of overtime every week. Your salary is pitiful. There's no extra pay for the extra hours. And to show how grateful they are for all this hard work, the school board fires you right in the middle of the school year. It just stinks. And I'm not kidding. You should really think about quitting. Or at least cutting back. They're just walking all over you. You shouldn't do one bit more than what they pay you for. Mr. Minert reached across the table and took his wife's hand. But it's my job. And as long as that's true, then I have to give it my best. I know that sounds dumb to you, but I can't help it. It's just the way I am. Lucy smiled and shook her head. I know. And if you were more like me, I probably never would have married you. It was the best moment of Mr. Minert's whole day. And that is the end of chapter 5. I'm wondering, what character trait do you think might describe Mr. Minor best? I think Mr. Minor seems like somebody who's really caring, even though we haven't necessarily seen that side of him yet. All right, your secret word for tomorrow is cookie. See you then.